very free-spirited household has really helped me to, I don't know what or how I would be without that. In terms of like, you know, being an artist. But yeah, I feel like for the most part though, you do need to know skills. You know, you need to learn how to do certain things. And I know there's a lot of like debate about whether or not art degrees are like necessarily like needed, you know? But I don't know, that's debatable, of course, but I do think it's really valuable to...
Hello, I'm Mason Hickok, and this is Design Down, a podcast series that looks at the creative process behind the graphics and photography work put in by the Paisano's artists and photographers. The Paisano is the independent student newspaper at the University of Texas at San Antonio. In this episode, I talked to Grace Robinson, one of the assistant photo editors at the Paisano.
If you can introduce yourself, your major, and how you got involved with the Paisano.
Okay, so my name is Grace. I'm a second-year UTSA student. My major is art with a specialization or like focus, I guess you would say, in new media, which is kind of like the closest thing you can get to graphic design. Because unfortunately UTSA doesn't have a whole graphic design major, or else I would definitely be doing that. But yeah, I kind of got started with the Paisano through Lainey, which is my roommate. She was really involved with it. And whenever I first moved here for college, I didn't really have, you know, a sense of like belonging or like any type of organization to be a part of. And so she was like, why don't you join? She kind of talked to me about how I could get involved with graphics. And I was super interested after that. And then that's that. And now I am an assistant, which is super exciting. I love it.
So your major is art.
Yes.
And your like concentration, it's not a minor, right? It's like a
No, yeah. Art majors are a little bit weird. They don't have like, I mean, I guess you can minor, but there's like focuses within your art major.
So new media is what like makes up the new media courses? Is it a mix of like visual, because you look at it sometimes on like UTSA's page and they talk about like animation, visual art and stuff like that. What do those classes typically entail?
So it's like digital communications. A lot of it's, you know, it's new media of art. So it's really digital art. So yeah, a lot of it, I mean, I do have to take an animation course, which I'm kind of nervous about. Like, I don't think I would be good at that. But yeah, so it's like animation, digital communications. I think there's like visual communications as well, which like I don't really know the difference. But the basics right now, I know I have to take like the regular basics of, you know, a BFA, which is just an art major. But that's just like consisted of like painting and ceramics, fun stuff like that. But I haven't really got to hit the new media stuff yet, which I'm super excited about.
When people go to like your page on the Paisano, they'll see just straight graphic. Some people it's just articles, some people it's articles on photography and graphics. Yours are strictly graphics. What's the program that you typically operate in?
Definitely Procreate is my main. I don't really mess with like Photoshop or anything like that, just because I don't really know how. I know that being at UTSA, we're fortunate enough to have like access to Adobe, right? Yeah. But I got Procreate whenever I got my iPad. That was like one of the first things I got. And it was tricky to kind of like learn the ins and outs of it. But once you get started with it, it's like super fun and pretty, you know, kind of easy to work with.
When did you pick up, like when you said you got your iPad, how long ago was that?
That was right before freshman year. So like the summer going into freshman year.
Of college?
Of college, yes. Okay. Yeah. So, and like I said, that was like one of the first things I got whenever I got my iPad. I was super excited about it. Yeah.
So before that, then you're doing just like physical art and like...
Yeah, that was like Procreate is the first time I've ever done digital art, and that's kind of how I got, like, I really wanted to be a graphic designer. I didn't always want to be a graphic designer. That kind of not recent necessarily, but I've never worked with that type of media. I've only worked with like, usually canvases is what, I was really familiar with, and painting with acrylic specifically is something that I really enjoyed and really loved. I messed around with that a lot. But once I guess like the summer going into freshman year, I kind of started to mess with it, and I was like, oh, I really, really like this. And kind of messing around with also doing like company designs was really fun for me.
Like logo design?
Yeah, kind of like logos. Yeah, that was just something that wasn't even on my radar. I wanted to be like a tattoo artist for a long time, and then once I kind of got into the graphic design, I was like, oh, I think I want to do that. So that's where I'm at now. And, it always might change, but yeah.
What kind of like differences between painting with like a paintbrush versus drawing with, a pen on ink?
Like on the iPad?
Yeah, what kind of like, obviously there's a difference between like, one is physical, the other is digital. Yeah. But what kind of like, do you approach it differently, or do you have like the same approach versus?
Definitely, I approach it way differently. On canvas, like when you're painting with like a actual paintbrush, or whatever you're painting on, it's a lot more technical, I think, just because there's not many mistakes that you can make if that's the type of art you're wanting to go for. That's why, with Procreate or any type of digital art, you can erase, any type of mistakes that you have seen, or, oh, I want to change this, I don't like this about my art, or your certain piece. So yeah, I do like that aspect, how you can just kind of like mess around with that and kind of delete things that you didn't like before and really perfect it. But I guess that is something that I do really enjoy about acrylic painting, is that it's a lot more organic and, more, it's not so much like, I'm going to make this as perfect as I want,
Eric talked about on his, because he shoots like Eric Trevino, one of our, he's a photographer at the Paisano, shoots digital but also shoots film photography, and had talked about the same thing as like film photography is different in the sense of like, you have a select amount of rolls on a film camera on a reel, where like you have that, just that roll. You don't have the opportunity to like kind of alter and change anything. Yeah. Whereas you're kind of talking about like, acrylic painting is kind of like an organic process, whereas film photography is kind of like similar.
Yeah, definitely there's like I said, artists specifically, that's something that we really look for in a painting, is kind of depending on the work. You're looking at like how organic it is, and sometimes you even see like the brush strokes and how much that affects, the feel of the painting. I was actually just at SAMA today for one of my art classes.
So San Antonio Museum?
Yeah. And it was just for one of like my basic courses, and it was really cool to see a lot of like the large like mural paintings that were on acrylic, because gosh, it's so like I could never do something so large and like see it in such a, I don't know, you're such a small human and doing such a large painting. I feel like that's really difficult, but it's really cool to see.
So like a photographer might go to like a museum and see photography, and the space that camera the shot was taken in, or if they're familiar with the photographer's work, the history of that photographer leading up to that image. How do you kind of like, and you talk about like noticing the brush strokes on something when you're at an art gallery or looking at a painting or of course this is probably different between I guess like I say physical art, I mean like like a painting versus something where it's like maybe viewable through a computer screen.
Right.
When you're observing something in its physical form like that, what are the types of things that you, I guess if you're like looking at it from an analytical perspective, that you're like looking at, like those brush strokes, shifted colors, like what are all the things that you take notice of?
Well, just being an art student, I think you look at like first of all, the contrast of the colors and how, like, that makes you feel. Because that's a really big part of looking at art. And I think a lot of people who are not that you have to be well versed, but people who don't necessarily like understand it will look at an art piece that's a little bit more abstract, and they're like, what does this even mean? Like, I feel like I could do this. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, what is this? But it's so much more complex than you think. You know, you look at, like I said, the different contrast of the colors, and you can also look at kind of the direction of the brushstrokes. If you feel like the brushstrokes were really, really hard, like if it was like aggressive brushstrokes, that definitely adds a lot to the painting. If it was, you know, more of a soft, kind of, what's the word? I don't know, just very calm brushstrokes. That also adds a lot of like how you feel to the painting and how, you know, it makes you think about certain things. It brings you back to either a memory or something you've experienced in your life. I mean, I guess that's the same thing. But yeah, I don't know. I just was looking at a few different abstract works today. And those were a few things I noticed that really stuck out to me. I love looking at those.
I would say like genre, just from like my like love of film.
Yeah.
Like, is there a genre of like art movement, I guess maybe is a better word, that you like typically, you know, if you're going to go to an art gallery or like an exhibition that is like showcasing a type of work, is there like some art movement that you prefer kind of viewing, or do you just kind of in general?
Do you mean like different forms? Like there's like sculpture and
like something like that. Yeah.
So actually, like, I have a really large background in painting, and I do love looking at all of the different types of painting on canvas specifically. But something that I have been really interested in is sculptures of any kind. I love them. I took a sculpture class my freshman year, and it was so difficult. It was so hard. It really challenged me, takes me out of my comfort zone big time. But that's just because I'd never worked with any of like sculpture stuff before. It had really just been painting up to that point, and stuff with graphics here, you know. It has never been, I've never had something take me out of my comfort zone like that before. So looking at it in museums or literally anywhere, it makes you really appreciate how much work they put into these sculptures. It's really cool.
There's a composer who I really enjoy, who's typically scores video games and kind of small independent feature films, who is married to an artist.
Oh, okay.
And he did this, or they did this show essentially where he kind of played a segment of songs from one of the soundtracks to the game he worked on, and she was like painting to the music essentially.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
How, like, I don't know, I guess maybe for your art specifically, I'd say outside of like Paisano stuff, like your personal stuff.
Right, yeah.
How does like other mediums, if at all, inspire that artwork, do you think?
Well, I think it's really like cool that you bring that up. In my foundations class right now, we're actually doing a project over like sound drawing. We have to do a full graphite piece over it. And it's really difficult to kind of interpret, you know, this is how I feel and this is what it makes me think of. But do you mean just like kind of going off of other, like your surroundings and how that inspires it, or?
Yeah, I guess like, I don't know, you know, are you one to maybe like pick up and stuff and go out into like a park and maybe not paint this space
like the scenery,
you,
right?
But like maybe be inspired by some of that stuff, or if you're listening to me, I don't know if you ever like if you paint or work to music, like how that can kind of like help drive whatever you're working on.
So I've actually done that before at my great grandparents' house. We used to live like right next to each other, and they had this really pretty pond they had a few on their property, but there was this really pretty pond next to their house. And I remember going out there not too long ago, actually, and just grabbing a canvas and taking a few paintbrushes out there and going. And I also listened to music while I was doing that, actually, to really just be in a space where you feel calm and you feel, not necessarily pressured by anything, makes you focus on kind of how you're feeling in your own life and in your own personal world, and you kind of just go off of that. At least I do. I'm sure it's different for everyone, but kind of being in a calm place where I just feel more zen, and especially being in an art class where you're kind of told to, your professors are saying, hey, this project is over this, or you need to draw a still life of this. You know what I mean? It's not really up to you. Yeah. And so having that time as an artist just by yourself, I think is really valuable.
Do you find that you creatively are challenged more when you have those like deadlines, so to speak, in like in a course, or do you feel like you kind of flow better when you don't have that kind of stuff, when you don't have those deadlines to meet,
I think it can be really tricky whenever, especially burnout, is in the picture now, since like if you're in such a creative field, you're always pushed, with those deadlines, being like, this is due by this time, or you need to do this. Yeah. It can be really difficult to have that motivation, even to like literally pick up a pencil. Like it can get really difficult, and it does get really difficult. But I think working with deadlines and with that guidance, it's not meant to be destructive. You know what I mean? Like your professors are there to help you and to guide you into the artist that you want to become, whatever field that may be in, So I do really love being in art school, and that aspect of it is really helps me a lot, because I would, without art school, I would go in phases where I'd be painting and drawing, sketching, doing whatever for like weeks on end. And then you just get so creatively tired, and your mind is like, doesn't really feel very creative. Yeah. You're at like kind of a loss, is like, that's what I've experienced, Like I said, artists are all different, and I think burnout occurs like so differently amongst everyone. Like writers, it's a huge thing in writers, it's a huge thing in every, field. So, but definitely.
I was going to ask this question at the end, but I want to ask it now. Yeah. How much of art would you say is learned versus like inept skill per se?
That's such a good question, Mason. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I feel like it may vary. Yeah. Like, I don't really know. It might be different depending on each person.
Like, do you come from an artistic family?
Definitely. Okay. Yeah. I mean, my dad is an artist in like every way. He writes music, he sings, he's a great like designer. He's designed my tattoos. Literally one, but he's great. And
which one?
The one on my leg.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like the tree from my childhood backyard. I just asked him to draw it with like a cool mandala around it, and he was like, okay. And then like a month later, he was like, do you want to get this done? But yeah, I don't know. I feel like growing up in a creative, very free-spirited household has really helped me to, I don't know what or how I would be without that. Yeah. In terms of like, being an artist. But yeah, I feel like for the most part though, you do need to know skills. You need to learn how to do certain things. And I know there's a lot of like debate about whether or not art degrees are like necessarily like needed, But I don't know. That's debatable, of course. But I do think it's really valuable to, if you're fortunate enough and if it's available to you, to be able to have those lessons and to take advantage of that and really take advantage of your professors. Ask them questions all the time, Like, it's important to learn these things. But I do think that growing up in a creative household, I was just able to do my own thing. Which definitely led me to where I am now.
Was UTSA always the first choice for like incoming freshmen? What I guess drew you specifically to pursuing an art degree at UTSA?
Well, I was really tempted in high school just because not many people went to UTSA. That was in my class, at least. Usually people went to UT, Texas State, A&M, stuff like that. And I was kind of jealous. I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to I felt like I wasn't going to have friends. I was really nervous about that. But I really liked UTSA because I feel like it was more of fine arts. Not that it's an art school or known for that, but I don't know. I just felt that it was a little bit more creative, and I felt like I could have the Paisano was definitely I didn't know that was even an option until Lainey talked to me about it. But I did some research on some of the majors that they had here, and I was really debating between Texas State and here, just because Texas State had an actual graphic design major, and I was really drawn towards that, but I ended up going here just because I felt like it was more, I don't know, it's a little smaller and just more my pace.
So speaking of the Paisano, I've had your little thing open. There's one graphic specifically that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
But when it comes to producing graphics for articles, you get a description of what the section editor's looking for, what the writer's looking for. Typically, how do you take that and then turn it into the graphic that's presented in the newspaper on the website? Do you pull inspiration from, if it's a political thing, or if it's, something having to do with activism or environmental things? Do you kind of look at stuff happening and try to pull images from that or pull things from that? How do you approach turning those words or those inspirations into those graphics?
Well, I don't want this to be too much of a basic answer, but I really just start by, obviously reading the description, reading what the editor wants or what the writer wants for their article, and then you start brainstorming from there, what does this remind you of? Or, oh, maybe I saw a photo that had something that was really similar to what this article entails. So I kind of, if I have no inspiration whatsoever, I will kind of go online and just type in something along the lines of what the article is about, or whatever it is about. And then if I see something that gets my creative juices flowing, then I will start to sketch it up. I will usually use my sketch pad to kind of start sketching it just to see, how things are being placed. And then once I do that, I pretty much just transfer it over into Procreate, and you can kind of edit it from there.
Can you so you typically, I don't know if it's always or just sometimes, but you typically start doing it on a sketch pad first?
Yeah, I would say 80% of the time.
So could you take that, I know Adobe has this thing where you can take a picture of something and transfer that picture into Photoshop or whatever. Is that when you're tracing in Procreate, is that essentially what you're doing?
So what I do is you can actually take a photo of it, and then whenever you're starting a new piece on Procreate, you can just hit the photo thing, and then you can click on the photo that you took, and then it all comes down to layers on Procreate. So I just make a new layer and then kind of edit it from there, and then once I'm all done, I delete the photo layer, so it's just left with the perfect piece that I think is sufficient. Yeah.
So the graphic that's always stood out to me that I've always really loved is this one that we published last semester. It was reproductive justice activists had come and spoken on campus. If you remember the kind of this graphic specifically, talk about and it'll be linked in the show notes for people to see. But talk about the graphic, and because I'd like to just hear you describe it a little bit.
Well, I personally was like really kind of nervous to upload this one, actually. Thank you, by the way, for saying that you really like it, because I really like it too. But I was kind of nervous because I'm more of an abstract kind of artist. I think that's just because I've never really been good at realism. I totally wish I was, but that's just kind of not my style. So I kind of steer towards more abstract pieces, and that's where you'll see these leaves types of things, these plants, and then some random organic shapes with a few different colors in them. I don't know. I remember seeing, I had like a photo of just, it was like a plain outline of like a uterus, and then I just used that and kind of went off of the photo. And like I said, I was like super nervous to upload it because I wasn't sure if that style would be okay. Just because I know that it's more of like a cool, like, clip art, professional type of style, but I really ended up liking it, and I think a few other people did too. I really love it, but I think the process really just came from, this sounds so like stupid, but just to like actually put my personality into it and let myself be creative, is kind of where I think that came from.
Speaking of, like, you were in college for art, specifically, that's what you're majoring in. If you were to kind of go back to Grace before college, or insert any other student entering college, soon to enter college, that's maybe like a little bit ambivalent about pursuing an art major or something adjacent, new media, sculpting, whatever. What kind of encouragement would you give somebody now that you've kind of been in that cycle of experiencing what it's like going to school for something like that?
Well, I love this question because it's super intimidating, especially like uploading your portfolio and being like, oh my God, what if they hate it? Like, what if this is not to their standards? But truly, if you just look at it in a sense that like everyone is in your same shoes. And I know I was really, especially for critiques, whenever you start getting into your actual courses, there's something that's called critiques, and it's a love-hate relationship. It's very intimidating at first. Basically, for people who don't know, a critique is presenting your work once it's polished and finished to the class, and your classmates are gonna critique it, and they're gonna be like, I would suggest this, or I think you should do this differently. It's really scary, but once you do notice that, I don't want to like sound cliche, but everyone there that's in your class or even in your major, you're all there for each other. And I really do believe that in every class, art class at least, that I've been in, everyone's helping each other out. It's not like a competition by any means. It's really, you're helping each other out and you're giving each other encouragement. And when it comes to critiques, I know it's like really terrifying, but arguably, I think that's like one of the most important aspects of an art class, is just taking those critiques not personally. It has nothing to do with who you are as a person and everything to do with how you can improve as an artist. And I think once you kind of get that into your head, then I think it all is, becomes a little bit easier and less stressful.
It's good parting advice. Thank you, Grace.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
You You can find the link to the story mentioned in this episode in the show notes below. In addition, Grace's staff page and the Paisano's Instagram are also linked. The music for this podcast was composed by Isaiah Piedra. Grace Robinson designed our graphic. Thank you for listening. You can find this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. For the Paisano, I'm Mason Hickok.
Thanks for watching. Click our logo to subscribe or click the videos for more from the Paisano. Leave a comment letting us know your thoughts and what you'd like to see us cover next.